Here with reaction, former Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg. Lieutenant General, let's talk to you about what you make of these new developments. We literally came within a couple of hours of, well, this being Bridge and Infrastructure Day.
Yeah, Sean, thanks for having me. I'm good to be with you. Look, I remember Ronald Reagan saying to Gorbachev during the nuclear transactions and negotiations, trust but verify. I think that's what we need to do. When you look at their foreign minister, Arachi, he wrote a book on negotiations. He called it Marketplace Negotiations. He's one of those guys, think of going in and buying a rug at a Mideast barter, just back and forth, back and forth. And I would caution him very much so that past is prologue, sort of like Shakespeare said in the play The Tempest. When you look what Donald Trump has done, he's an action-verb personalized. It's what he did in the first term. Saddam Hussein, Bashar Assad hit his people with nerve gas. It was a red line that was never promised and fulfilled by Obama. President Trump went in, he actually attacked the places that launched the nerve gas from. He actually moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem after 37 waivers from previous presidents. He went after and he walked away from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. He killed Soleimani. He did all this and had cautioned the Iranians. This is a guy who means what he says, and be very careful about it. If in 2 weeks they keep postulating and don't come to an agreement, I would say we're going to take Karg Island, which is their economic lifeline. We will take the islands in the Straits, Geisham Island and Lanark Island. We'll make sure that the Straits stay open. We'll make sure that the flow of oil is good, and we'll control it. So this is one of those you tell the Iranians, look, this is a guy you're dealing with right now who means what he says. He's not like other presidents who've said things and never delivered. He will deliver. So this is a chance for them to actually deliver the goods for in the next 2 weeks. And we'll just have to wait and see, just like Reagan said. Trust but verify.
Let me go back to the Straits and what I believe are the two most important issues. Keeping open the Strait of Hormuz, number one. Number two, the 60% enriched uranium. That means they can never be a nuclear power. That has been stated over and over again by the president. When you talk about the U.S. keeping the Strait open, when the U.S. taking over Karg Island, again, that's where 90% of their oil comes from. That's where it's all refined and put together and shipped out. What makes you think that is part of the overall overarching goal of the president?
Well, it's an overarching goal, but it's also, when you go back, he actually does what he said he's going to do. You know, they violated the JCPOA at the very start, and the IAEA said that. They knew for a fact they were enriching uranium well above the 3.67% they were allowed to enrich that uranium. They're going to 60 to 80%. You're getting your weapons grade, which is 90%. So this is one of those, we're going to keep watching it. We can monitor it. We're going to have to let it, that the IAEA can go in on the ground and actually see what's happening and making sure that nothing's happening with the enrichment of uranium. The Iranians prevented that from the first time. That was one of the reasons we walked away from JCPOA. Not only was it time limited, but also the fact that they never got to check in and see what was actually happening on the ground with the research. So this is one of those, they're going to have to deliver, pretty much so. And the president's going to go through the next 2 weeks. He's going to make sure that happens. And there's going to be consequences if they don't. And I think that economically, we will destroy them. Their military's already been destroyed. Their nuclear capacity's already been destroyed. The next is we destroy them as a nation, which means we economically destroy them. You can do that with keeping the Straits open and also taking Karg Island. We have the capacity, the capability to do that with our military. We have proven that more than once we could do it. We now have a leader that is willing to do it. He doesn't just talk about it. He's willing to execute and actually fulfill that job.
Well, my understanding is we know where that enriched uranium is. I would imagine that the Libyan model that we used in the past, we would send in American scientists, nuclear scientists. They would handle it. They would remove the canisters. We would take full control of it. That seems completely non-negotiable. Do you think the Iranians have already agreed to that part?
Well, they should. I mean, that's what goes back to the type of individual they're dealing with, was Donald J. Trump. I wouldn't use our troops. I would say we don't have to use our troops to do it. I would say to the IAEA, to Grossi, hey, look, this is your job. You get paid to do this, dude. You go in and you get those canisters.
But that's
you
not
get
what
the
we did in
enriched
Libya.
uranium. You're the one that's supposed to be controlling that product as well. So I wouldn't put our troops at any risk. They don't have to do it.
I'm not
They
talking
need to
about
do
our
it.
troops.
Comes together with it's an outside party. Grossi is not an American. And this is where there's ability to do that. Make them to go do it. Make the UN go do that. For once, maybe the UN can do something that's positive.
I don't trust the UN to do anything. The IAEA has, effectively been wrong on their nuclear capability the entire time, and the Iranians, get to basically say anything they want to the IAEA, and they just regurgitate it. But we'll see what happens. This will play out very quickly. Lieutenant General Kellogg, thank you. We appreciate it. Go ahead, sir.
To them, they were denied presence. They were denied presence.
Yeah.
It's one of those things. Force them to go in. Force them to do it. The Iranians didn't allow them to go in the last time. Force the Iranians to allow them in.
I really trust the Americans to do it. I think our scientists, our military would need to be in control of it. Maybe you're right. Maybe that's a better call. Certainly something worth thinking about. General, we appreciate you being with us as always. Thank you. Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.